Hello and welcome to Endurance Minded. It's the podcast that aims to redefine what it means to reach our full potential by exploring how movement and mindset impacts our lives and how we can all work to show up as the best versions of ourselves. I'm your host, Taylor Thomas, founder at TEC, and before we get started, I've got an all call. If you're a coach or an entrepreneur in the health and fitness industry who's trying to grow your business without burning out, I want to personally invite you to apply for the Growth Circle. The Growth Circle is our business accelerator program at TEC, and it's designed specifically to serve providers like you in the health and fitness industry. People who are incredible at what they do, but they need a proven framework and real support to actually scale. Let's be real, running a coaching business can feel like a grind. You're juggling programming and client communication, marketing, admin work, and somehow you're still trying to grow your business. That's where the Growth Circle comes in. Inside the program, we help you nail down your ideal client and get really clear on what your offer is. We help you build a consistent lead gen process so you're not wondering where your next client comes from. We help you improve your sales skills without feeling salesy. And most importantly, create systems and support so that you're not doing it alone. You'll be a part of a driven community of other business owners in this space who get it. We host regular group calls, team intensives, mastermind sessions to make sure you're never stuck trying to figure it out in a silo. So if you're tired of winging it, if you're tired of trying to do it all by yourself, to recreate the wheel, figure out what levers to pull, what's broken and what's not, if you're ready to turn your passion into a business that actually works for you, I want to invite you to apply. You can find the link to the Growth Circle in our show notes. And I want you to really think about what's best for you and your business. I want you to think about how your business can really make an impact on the industry and how it can give you the life that you're excited about and make the money that you deserve, working with the clients that you love, spending time investing in the things that you care about and you're passionate about. So if this is a problem you're committed to solving and you want to take your business to the next level, again, click the link in the show notes. I can't wait to hear from you. Hello and welcome back. We're going to talk about this moment that I know is inevitable, and I think that it happens a lot. And it's that moment in every athlete's, every entrepreneur, every leader's journey where the version of what got you there, the version of what got you to where you're at, stops being the version that can take you to where you want to go. It's uncomfortable, it's confusing, it's often painful, it's riddled with self-doubt, with feeling like you're unmoored, there's a lack of a North Star. And what this is called is the identity gap. And it's that liminal space. It's the space between needing to be the person to align with how you're moving through the world and then developing the actions, emotional intelligence, the systems, the habits, the goals, the positive self-talk, developing all of the pieces necessary to allow yourself, give yourself permission to go in that direction. And I know that this happens. I talk to people all the time that are in this space, right? They've done the thing, the external actions are telling them that they are someone else. Right? They're smarter, stronger. They've grown the business, done the thing, accomplished the goal. They're a better athlete. They're whatever it is, but they're still playing catch up with their identity. They still feel like they are the person that is en route to that thing. So the brain is really always kind of a chapter behind where we're at physically. And this is something that's always going to happen if you are a high performer. If you're a driver, if you're always going to be setting goals, if you're someone who's committed to getting past that plateau, there is this inevitable friction that is caused by being, mentally, our brains being a chapter behind. So today we're going to talk about how to navigate it. We're going to talk about how to develop the skills necessary to actually see this thing through, and we're going to explore why this internal identity often lags behind your external growth. We're going to talk about how to recognize the signs that you are evolving. We're going to explore, and I'm going to break down the mindset tools needed to step into this next level, this next chapter with clarity and confidence. And so, if you're in a season of transition or reinvention or growth, you're in a season of building, then this episode is going to help you bridge the gap between who you've been and who you are actively becoming. And just to kind of sum that up, or to take that to a final end point, what I think that the clearest way to capture this is that the version of you that succeeded, the version of you that succeeded before or got you to where you're at, is no longer the version that you need. Right? The version of yourself that has accomplished the things that have gotten you to where you're at right now is no longer the version that you need. It is not going to be the person that is going to take you forward. And so there again, there's this friction. And I want you to keep that in mind as we walk through this episode, as you listen. Think about where you're at in that friction. Where are you at in that equation? And again, this can be in all areas of life. This can be in relationships. It certainly happens in business, in our careers. It 100% happens in our athleticism and our identity that is intrinsically linked to who we are as individuals. And so let's start to just further flesh out what the identity gap is. Again, it is that uncomfortable space between your old identity and your next identity. And I want you to really focus on that language, and I use that intentionally. Your next identity. It's not your new identity. It is the next version of who you are becoming, right? And I think part of that language, or what makes that language powerful, is that your next identity also means that there is an inherent amount of ambiguity, meaning that we don't quite know what it is. We don't quite know what all of the parts are. We don't yet understand fully how that's going to be formed and how that's going to manifest and how we're going to need to behave and what skills and resources and tools we're going to need to be that person. But we know that it is the next identity. And so again, I use that language intentionally because I think that there is an inherent opportunity to recognize that it's not a wholesale change. It's not a new person, but it is the next version of the person that we are, given the things that we have stacked, given the wins, given the learning opportunities, given the growth. There is a new version there. And so there's a lot of psychology that that goes into this. And I want to give you just a few anchors here. One is that identity theory tells us that humans, us as individuals, we like to anchor to consistent self-images, right? We enjoy being anchored to things that are consistent, right? We know what to expect. We know who we are. We know how to navigate this situation. We're not uncomfortable or scared, or it doesn't bring us anxiety. And so the identity theory tells us that humans like this anchor, right? We appreciate the consistency in how we see ourselves, both internally as well as how we see ourselves in the world. And so just right there, that provides, that highlights that inevitable friction that I touched on earlier. Next, there's an inherent internal there's an inherent internal dissonance, right? And what I mean by that is when our behaviors evolve faster than our beliefs. And this is that piece of our brains are always a chapter behind. Specifically in high performance environments, things move quickly. And so our behaviors have to be out of step. They have to be outpaced with how we're grappling with this internally, right? We don't have time to sit and process and think about what is this anchored self-image and how is evolving, and what does this mean for how I show up, and am I smart enough to do this? And we don't have time to wrestle with that. And I'm not saying that making that time is not important, but things move fast. We have to make decisions. And so there is this inherent, again, internal dissonance where our behaviors are evolving faster than our beliefs about ourselves, our beliefs about the world. And then we have the identity lag, right? So this is where our brain, like I said, is always one chapter behind. There's just this, I want to restate this because I think this is really the crux piece, is that there is this internal inherent relationship with how we process information, how we recognize these things in real time, and then the time required to take action. And so this identity lag is really the crux component. There's a lot of ways that this shows up. It certainly shows up again in our athletic identity. On the other side of a goal, on the other side, we do a big race, we finish a goal, we commit to 100 days of something. Whatever the thing is, we have taken action that has changed who we are. Right? We've built habits and discipline. Our physiology has changed, but we're still rooted in the person that started that thing. We're still rooted in the person who was at the onset of that goal, who was nervous and scared and trepidatious and didn't know if they could finish it, didn't know if they could see it through. But now it has happened, and there's a lag. This happens when we shift into leadership roles. The person who goes from doing everything to the person who now is identifying people's strengths and tasked with helping those individuals reach their full potential. Right? We're still rooted in the task orientation. We're rooted in the person who got their hands dirty, did everything. It was up to them to see all of the goals through, and now there's a shift. It's rooted in the business owner who is growing so quickly that their self-image hasn't caught up, right? The person who has worked and put in the hours and is finally seeing the growth that they wanted, but they still remember when it wasn't working, when they were unsure of their idea, when they didn't have access to the tools and resources that they needed. But that's changed, but we can't let go of that, right? Again, there's a lag. And so ultimately, what we see here, very simply put, is that our life tends to upgrade before our identity does. The gap is where most people quit, but it's also where real transformation happens, right? So let me say that again. Our life upgrades before our identity does. It's in that space that people feel fraught. They're not able to recognize what it looks like to step into that new identity. And so they get bogged down. When your life and your identity don't align, it feels very fraught. And that feels like you're not making progress. You can tell yourself that things aren't working, that you're not smart enough, that you don't have the tools, that you're not the person you need to be. And so people quit in that space. But when we recognize, again, that is an inherent aspect of growth, that's where the biggest transformation happens, when we get to step into that next identity, like I talked about. So let's talk about how it really shows up. I want to give you some really clear understanding of what it looks like, so that you can see these signs and signals in yourself. One of the biggest ways is decision paralysis. Right? I'm not talking about decision fatigue. I'm talking about decision paralysis. What that means is that you're hesitating to make decisions. You're hesitating to move because your old identity doesn't match the choices your new identity needs to make. Right now, I think this can be a bit of a complex thing to wrap your head around, but think about this. Where you're at, again, the actions that you've taken and the actions that you need to take have moved faster. They have outpaced your identity. They've outpaced your brain's ability to comprehend where you're at. Again, there is this lag. And so what is happening is the choices that you need to make to move things forward, the choices for your health, the choices for your business, the choices for hiring, the choices for who you surround yourself with and how you communicate in the relationships that are most impactful. These things don't align with your old identity, right? And so we hesitate, we freeze because who we think we are and who we need to be are not in alignment. And so we can't quite rectify that. And so we sit, we don't move, we take inaction, which inaction is a choice, right? Inaction is a decision, but decision paralysis is, I think, one of the biggest ways that this can show up. And again, I want you to recognize or work to see yourself in this. Are these any signs that you've recognized? Is it happening right now? Has it happened in the past? Right? Again, you're hesitating because your old identity doesn't match, it doesn't align with the choices that your new identity, your next identity, needs to make. Next, and most prevalent, imposter syndrome, right? More specifically, imposter thoughts. So what's the difference there? So imposter syndrome would tell us that we don't belong there. Imposter thoughts is going to tell us that there is an identity mismatch. So what that means is that we're operating at a level that you haven't self-identified with. Right? So we have imposter thoughts. It's an identity mismatch. It's not that we think that we don't belong. It's that we truly aren't able yet to have the thoughts necessary to align with our current reality. So there's a mismatch. Right? And I think this is again, to draw it back, this is the lag. This is the piece that's important to recognize. And when we recognize that, we can pull our thoughts into alignment with the actions required to be the person that we are, to be our next identity. The third piece is that we get emotional whiplash. So what this sounds like is we're really proud of ourselves 1 minute. We're able to celebrate. We recognize our wins. We feel super aligned with who we are. We feel clear and connected to the decisions we need to make in alignment with the person that we are. And then the next minute, we doubt. Right? I'm not smart enough. Maybe I don't know what I'm doing. Maybe this isn't the right direction. Maybe X, Y, Z, insert whatever it is. And so what this really boils down to so often is that there is a fear of being seen as the new version of yourself. Again, we like to stay safe. We like to be rooted in these past realities. We like to be rooted in the things that we can trust. And so it's scary to move into the new version. It's scary to think, well, what if I'm not good at that? What if it doesn't work out? What if I'm wrong? What if people hate this new version? What if I lose friends? What if my family gets mad at me? What if my coworkers don't respect me? There's an emotional whiplash there. We're constantly navigating the pride and the excitement and the feeling of energy for what we've accomplished. And then immediately on the other side of that, back and forth all the time is doubt, fear, anxiety, being scared. And again, I think this is really rooted in just a fear of being seen as the new version of ourselves because it's unfamiliar. We don't know what that person looks like, feels like navigating the world. And so we like to come back to the things that are safe. Another way that this shows up is we have backsliding in our behavior. And so what this means is that we go back to old habits. We go back to those things that feel safe, those things that help us feel moored and secured. And it's because they feel familiar. It's not because they still serve us. It's not because it's actually the best thing, but it is because it feels safe. It's familiar. And so we go back to them. Right? In athleticism, I'm going to go back to eating for comfort versus eating for performance. I'm going to go back to not paying attention to how I treat myself during the day, not focused on sleep, not focused on recovery, not focused on hydration and diet. I'm going to go back to not telling myself that if I don't have a big goal out in front of me, it's not worth training. This is the one I see a lot, right? I think anybody who identifies as an athlete, this can feel like a place, it can feel like purgatory, right? If I'm not in the build up to the biggest, hardest thing I've ever done, it's not worth it. So I'm going to backslide. I'm going to go back to old habits that I know don't serve me, but it's comfortable because I'm not quite sure how to operate in this new space. I'm not quite sure what my North Star should be, or at least I tell myself that because I don't have this big, sexy thing out in front of me. So the sum total of the effort is not worth it. Right? Same thing with entrepreneurship and business. We go back to habits. We overwork, we burn out. We think that our only value is to be the hardest working person in the room, working the most hours. That's the only way that we can set an example for our organization. What we're not doing is we're not stepping into leadership. We're not stepping into helping others recognize their full potential and leveraging their expertise and skills and value that they bring to the table. Because even though it doesn't serve us and even though it sucks and it's hard, at least we can feel safe by being the person that we used to be. Right? At least we can feel safe by just working hard, putting our nose to the grindstone and telling ourselves that that's actually what's going to move the needle, even though we know intellectually that it's not. Right? So behavior backsliding is a big piece of this. If you find yourself going back to things that you know don't serve you, check yourself. That's a core sign that you're in this identity gap. Next is that there is a relationship tension component. I can't overstate this enough. People expect you to stay where you were because it helps them feel safe. If you have the wrong people around you, they don't want you to grow because it turns a mirror on themselves and highlights that they're not growing. So if you're growing and they're not, that creates an identity crisis for them. They want to hold you back. They want you to stay the same person because it helps them feel safe. When you're growing, it shifts relationship dynamics. That's super uncomfortable. So there's going to be tension in your relationships. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Progress requires pruning. There's no better example of that than in the relationships that we have. If you are moving forward, you need to make sure that the people around you are not holding you back because they're scared of growth. Right? Your growth should get the right people around you excited because they're growing too. Doesn't mean they have to be growing in the same direction. Doesn't mean they have to be focused on the same things. But growth with the right people is exciting. Growth with the right people is valuable. Growth with the right people is transformative. Growth with the wrong people pulls you back because they're scared, right? It means they make that mean something about them. And so, again, this happens all the time when we see people kind of quote unquote level up. And again, I want you to just put yourself in this place. Did any of these things resonate? Are you there now or have you been there in the past? And what can you do to shift? What can you do to position, to turn the page, to get to the next chapter? Right? Your actions are there, but you're lagging behind. This is the piece that we have to shift. And let's talk about what it looks like to make that shift, the psychology of becoming that next identity. Because again, physically we're there. We're taking those actions. We are the person. We're moving through the world in that way, at least when we're in a line, when we're not sabotaging ourselves with some of the other things that I just talked about. But we're there. There's the psychological piece, the mental component is what has to shift. So why does it exist in the first place? I want to go back. Let's just talk about the mental component. Why does the gap exist? Well, again, the brain prefers familiarity. Specifically, the brain would rather be, your brain would rather be familiarly discomfort or familiarly uncomfortable over having unfamiliar success. Right, let me say that again because I messed it up. Your brain prefers familiar discomfort over unfamiliar success. I think this is a really crux piece. We have to recognize this, right? We are wired to settle into things that we know don't serve us, to settle into being miserable. But if we are miserable and we're familiar with that, our wiring tells us that that is better than success that is unfamiliar. Right? And so we're constantly having to butt up against this. So identity equals safety, right? The thing that we can trust, the identity that we know, our old identity, that's safe. Change is a threat. Again, that next identity, the change that's required. We have to be someone different. We have to do different things to get somewhere else. And so change equals threat. So the more you grow, the more you push, the more you drive, the more you're hungry, the more your brain tries to pull you back to the baseline. Again, this is how we're wired. And so we have to recognize that there is a fraught relationship there. If you are someone who's hungry for growth, and I'm not just talking about success as it relates to kind of external standards, money, athletic achievements, being the best. I'm talking about growth, right? Being a different person, growing as a human, being a better communicator, a better leader, being someone who's supportive in the world, whatever that looks like for you. If you are someone who is eager to grow, know that the more that you do that, the more energy and effort you put into that growth, the more your brain is going to try to pull you back to the baseline, to the old standards, the old ways, the old identity. Even if you're miserable, even if it's uncomfortable, we would rather have familiar discomfort than unfamiliar success. And I think that is the single biggest opportunity if we recognize that, knowing that there is a fraught relationship there helps us build tools and know that when we are in growth, we need to be prepared to align our identity with the actions that we're taking. Otherwise, we're going to be constantly pulled back, right? We're going to be fraught with getting pulled back to old baselines, being around people that don't support our growth. Again, all of these things that we've talked about. And so there's layers of identity, right? Again, when we recognize that this is not just a one and done thing, as you grow, this will continue to happen. So this isn't a one-off experience. Can happen. I mean, it could happen, every week, every quarter, multiple times a year as you uncover growth opportunities. We're going to have to wrestle with this. So, what does this actually look like? I want to give you some real world examples. First, from a performance perspective, there's just like no greater, I think, more clear-cut representation of this than the way that our bodies process stress, right? So from a training adaptation perspective, growth happens when the body is stressed. We have just enough force to force evolution, to force adaptation. It's the same thing with identity. right? So we have discomfort equals adaptation. We know that there is no world in which growth happens without friction. There's no world in which discomfort doesn't equal change. And it's the same thing in our body, right? If you want to get more fit, you have to push yourself, right? You have to make sure that you're providing the appropriate amount of stress so that on the other side of that, combined with rest and recovery, you get adaptation. The identity shift is the same, right? Discomfort equals change. When we're in that space, when we're in the identity gap, that is the discomfort. That's the stress we're putting on our bodies, recognizing that, and then moving into that next identity. That's mental fitness, right? That's psychological fitness. There's tons of tie-ins with this in the leadership realm as well. Every new stage of business requires a new identity. This is an even more rapid expansion of this over and above the physical manifestation that I just talked about. We have, from a solo individual who starts the business, the solopreneur, building the business, becoming the CEO, right? You are not a CEO until you are in service of other people in your business, right? You cannot be a CEO and be a solopreneur. Those are different things, right? But as you move from a solopreneur into a person who is in service of those around you, so that your core and primary responsibility is helping others do great work and recognizing the opportunities in that organization, there's a massive identity shift there. We go from being a person who is, singularly responsible. It's the coach to the leader, right? The person who can do it for themselves, but how do you help others do it? Right? The person that goes from being the grinder, right? The person who is doing the most work, working the most hours, head down, do whatever it takes, to the strategist, right? Working on the business, not in the business. So at every new stage, and this is whether you're an entrepreneur or you're in a career where you're focused on growth, there's so many levels of new identity opportunities, right? That next identity. And it often happens rapidly. You can be really pushed to need to be a different person many, many times over the course of a couple of years. We layer that in with the personal components, right? So our responsibilities to our families, our responsibilities to ourselves, our personal health, both physically, mentally, emotionally, all of those things layered, you are constantly pushed to step into that next identity because your actions have outpaced who you are. And that happens really quickly. And so recognizing that as quickly as possible is going to allow you to take full advantage of that. It's also going to keep you from being miserable, right? When you are getting pulled back into those old identities, but your actions are doing other things, your actions are in alignment with that next identity, that's a shitty place to be. Every day you wake up confused. You wake up anxious, scared, fearful. You're stuck in the middle. You don't feel like the person who's moving through the world, who's doing the things, who's accomplished the things that you set out to do. If you can align that, the more quickly you can do that, the happier you're going to be. Because otherwise you're stuck in the middle, you're getting dragged back down and you feel it. So with that in mind, how do we close the identity gap? Again, how can we do that more quickly so that you can spend more time living into the next identity and less time being uncomfortable and being drugged back down and being miserable? One, I think the best place to start is just define what the next version of you is. This is an exercise that I've done, and it's been really, really impactful. What that looks like is you literally write down what's the next version of you in detail. What are your habits, your beliefs, your behaviors, your boundaries? Who is this person? What that allows you to do is to build the bridge. You can see it on paper or on your screen. You can identify who that person is so that you can go be that person. Right? I think it can feel very nebulous and ambiguous when we just try to map this out in our minds. We say, oh, I think that I'm this person, or I think that it looks like X, Y, and Z. No, map it out, right? Ask yourself, like, what would the future me stop tolerating? What would you stop tolerating? You'd stop tolerating not prioritizing yourself. You'd stop prioritizing habits that don't support who you want to be. You'd stop prioritizing letting people walk over you or dictate your time or tell you what's highest and best. You'd stop tolerating, right? Insert whatever it is. What do you need to say no to that's dragging you back down so that you can allocate time towards that next identity, towards aligning with the person that you know that you need to be, but you're fighting it. And again, that's how we're wired. That's not a critical statement towards you. There's that inherent fraught relationship like we talked about. So you can write your identity manifesto, right? Map this out. Who is the person? And when you feel like you're in this place, do it again. Again, this is something that's going to happen a lot. So get used to it. Do a little bit of self-mapping. Again, just allow yourself the opportunity to see what that actually looks and sounds like. So you don't become the new or the next identity instantly. You have to shift small actions over the course of time. Right? So I'm talking about, okay, how can you do that more quickly? How can you identify what that needs to be so that you can spend less time being unhappy? Right? We can all agree there, but knowing too that it's not a wholesale change. You don't wake up and just like, ta-da, here's this person. So you got to take small daily actions that stack. Examples of that are, with leadership, it's, what's the one leadership decision that I make today? What's the one decision I can make that pulls me away from an operator, that pulls me away from that grinder into a strategist? Can I give someone a task? Can I communicate with someone that helps them recognize their expertise? Can I lead a meeting in a different way? Can I schedule time? What's the one decision you can make today that helps you move more clearly and confidently in that direction? You want to be healthier, right? What's the next meal that I can align with my identity? Right? So I'm not going to worry about meal planning for the whole week. I'm not going to worry about prepping. If it's morning, how can I align my lunch with the identity that I want to have? So don't focus on, I got to do all these things. What's the next decision you can make? Right? Here I am. We're at your office. You're at your desk. You're working hard. Can I go get a cup of water? When's the last time you had some water? Can I hydrate? Can I stand up versus sitting? What's the next decision you can make to align with the identity that you know that you want to be? One small action stacked is what dictates your future, right? Again, these things don't happen over time. It's I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to stack this, right? I'm going to drink a glass of water. I'm going to have some electrolytes. I'm going to stand at my desk. I'm going to eat a lunch that serves me, and then I'm going to have a snack that feels good, and then I'm going to work out. And then even though I'm tired, I know that I'm committed to the discipline to do this thing because I know that stacked efforts over time are what shift into the person that I want to be. Next is we got to build in some accountability. So you got to surround yourself with people who reflect the identity that you need to have back on you. This is what I talked about. I promise you, this is the biggest piece. If you're around people that are dragging you down because they're making your growth mean something about them, you got to get out of there, right? You have to be around people that support your growth and support your identity. Again, you got to surround yourself with people who reflect that next identity back to you. You got to choose people who are able to not see you as you were. I remember when you'd X. I remember when you used to just, watch Netflix all day. I remember when you were happy with where you were at in your career and you weren't hungry for growth. I remember when, you didn't work out 6 days a week. I'm not saying that any of those things aren't what defines success, but ultimately you got to choose people who don't see you as who you were. You got to see people who recognize what you want to become and support that. So one of the best ways to do that is to communicate that clearly. Share your next identity. Share the person that you want to become after you've mapped it out. Share that with 1 to 2 people that you can trust. Communicate that clearly and then use those individuals or leverage those relationships to hold you accountable. And task them with that. Hey, if you see me doing things that don't support the person that I just told you I want to be, call me on it. If you see me being lazy, if you see me, eating a dozen donuts, if you see me not, overworking myself and not leveraging my team, I want you to leverage it. I want you to call me on it. Right? You need people to hold your feet to the fire. If you're committed to growth. Now, if that's not the case, that's totally fine, because that's going to also make you really mad. But if you're truly hungry for growth, if you're not just saying it, but you really want it, you gotta get feedback. You need people to hold you accountable. And then next, you got to build in some new rituals. You got to let go of things that don't support you, and you got to build in some new habits and practices. So you can't step into this next identity without recognizing that you got to let go of the old person. And what that's going to mean is that there's going to be some things you need to grieve. The old person might have had more free time. The old person might have been able to lounge around. The old person might have not had, as busy a schedule. The old person might have not needed to travel and make sacrifices. Whatever it is, you're going to have to step into this next identity, and you're going to have to really let go of and grieve that old person. That old person was comfortable. That old identity was something you knew and you trusted, and it was safe. So it was a cozy place to be. Right? It's not the case anymore. That's okay, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't suck to let go of that person. And so take a second and really recognize what you're letting go of. Right? And next, you got to release the roles and expectations that no longer fit. Again, what is this? What are the things that you are doing that don't serve you? Roles and expectations. Roles that you're doing, expectations that you have on yourself, as well as maybe expectations for others. It's time to redefine. You got to release those things. And you got to be willing and able to step in to this next level of growth. So let's bring it all home. What does this actually look like? First, I want you to reflect. I want you to ask yourself a few questions and be really, really honest. First one is, where in your life do you feel the identity gap right now? Again, this doesn't just has to be specific to any one area of your life. So it's not just business. It's not just athleticism. It's not just leadership. It's not just home. I want you to look at your life as a whole, and I want you to think about, where in your life do you feel the identity gap right now? Where are your actions not in alignment with how you feel and the identity that you're holding on to? Next is, I want you to ask yourself, what part of the old you, of that old identity, that existing or previous identity, are you afraid to let go of? Again, I think we have to recognize that it just because we know that the next version is better for us doesn't mean that it's not going to suck to let go of the old person. Because that old person got to do some things that the new person isn't going to be able to do. Right? There are sacrifices with growth. And so a lot of that releasing comes from being, jealous of or envious of the old identity. Man, we need to just let go of and identify what we're afraid to release. Okay, next question I want you to ask. What's one action your future identity would take today? Again, don't focus on the sum total. What's the one thing today? What's the one action that you can take that would align with the person that you know you need to be? Again, think about fitness. Don't worry about everything. What can you do right now? Can you stand? Can you drink water? What does lunch look like? What's the next meal, the next opportunity to align with the person that you want to be? And so, with all that in mind, you have to recognize that you're not lost. This is a transition. And again, it is one then if you're hungry for growth, is going to happen a lot. But the next version of who you are, it's already happened. It's already in progress. You just get the opportunity to step into it. So know that this is where you're supposed to be. There's nothing but opportunity on the other side of this. We just got to work on that alignment, right? We got to bring your identity into alignment with your actions so that you can fully take advantage of your next identity, which will become your current identity. So, as always, I hope you walked away with something meaningful. Hope you're able to take intentional action today to reach your full potential, step a little bit more into what you're capable of and what you're meant to do and how you're meant to move through the world. As always, you can find us at enduranceminded.com. Let us know what's going on. Drop us a comment at the bottom. We'd love to hear from you. Last but not least, rate, subscribe, and share. As you all know at this point, it is the lifeblood of all podcasts, and it would mean the world to me if you could rate this podcast on your favorite platform. Subscribe so you get alerted to new episodes released every other Tuesday, and share this episode or one of your favorites with a friend that you think could get value out of it. It would mean the world. Again, rate, subscribe, share. Thank you so much. I'll see you next time on Endurance Minded.